How's your ride?
Holding package.
Yeah.
Riding the backpack, so.
Sorry.
All right. I'm grateful if I don't fall, make a bad safely, nothing spills. Okay.
That order?
Safely. Make a bad safely.
Nothing spills
Nothing spills.
and you don't fall.
Oh, don't fall is number one. Don't fall, that and then safely is kind of connected with it.
Hi, guys. Rabbi, you get my message?
Yeah, I obviously, they sound excellent. I'm a huge fan of Immortals and.
Yeah, his book,
another
the
one.
one that I have there for you, is really, really good.
Okay, cool.
And if you have any questions, you can call Sharon because she was the reviewer for the book for her book club.
Oh, nice.
So she did the book, all that. So in case you have questions of anything you don't understand, she'd be happy.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for volunteering her. Now she's gonna
Now she won't sleep
have to
waiting for your
punish
call.
you. Yes.
I'll put it. I'll send them next time we go to the post office.
Okay. Thank you. I'm very grateful.
No problem.
Okay.
You know, Rabbi, I really like this Nazir stuff for some reason. Maybe because I have long hair. You
It
know,
might, and I
and
aspire.
a beard, and a beard.
There you go. I aspire to long hair, but haven't quite gotten there. Okay. So we are now in mitzvah 36. And that mitzvah is as follows. That is, that he commanded us that the priests serve in watches, each watch serving 1 week. And the hand of all should not be mixed together in service, except on festivals, when all the watches serve equally, and anyone who comes from them can offer a sacrifice. So, well, let's see a little bit more. And this has already been explained in Chronicles, how David and Shmuel divided them into 24 watches. And it is explained in Sukkah that the hand of all the priests are equal on festivals. The language of this commandment is his saying, if a Levite would go, etc., he may come as he pleases, he may serve in the name of the Lord, etc., they shall eat equal shares. The language of the Sifrei is, he may come as he pleases, I might think always, hence we learn to say from one of your gates, when all of Israel are assembled within one gate, and that is during the 3 festivals. I might think that all the watches are also equal for offerings brought on the festivals, not for the sake of the festival. Hence, we learn to say, aside from the sale of the fathers, what the fathers sold to each other, you take them on your Shabbos, and I on my Shabbos. This means their agreement about all of the watches of the service, 1 watch for each week. And so did Onkelos explain, except for the allotment, which comes on Shabbat, as our forefathers have regulated. And they've also explained the laws of this commandment at the end of the Gemara in Sukkah, Parsha Shofti, Mishnah Torah, vessel of the sanctuary, and those who serve therein. Okay, so what is this all about? So the way it worked is this. If you're a Kohen, you are part of a family. The way they divided up the Kohanim is according to family. So you have your immediate family. Your immediate family are part of a larger family. So let's say it's the Schwartzes, and these are Schwartz Kohanim. These are the Schwartzes. So you have lots of families. Over time, it's developed so that you have lots of families that are related, that are part of, let's say, the Schwartz clan. That clan gets a 1 week in of service in the Beit HaMikdash. Altogether, it says here that there were, does it say 24? Divided them into 24 watches. I think he said 24, right? Yeah, 24 watches. So altogether, there's 24 watches, which means that there are 24 of these family groupings. When you're part of this family grouping, you then go up to the Beit HaMikdash at your designated week, because they all get designated, each family grouping, each one of these mishmar, they call it a mishmar, each one of these mishmars is going to get a week. So that means that you and your brothers, your father, maybe your grandfather, your cousins and uncles, you're all going up to work in the Beit HaMikdash for a week. And there's again 24 different families. So what would happen is you'd go 1 week, and then maybe a half a year later, you're going to go another week. So in the course of a year, you've actually gone for 2 weeks, because there's 24 watches, and you're mainly, I think you're going about 48 weeks. There's also the holiday weeks, so the pilgrimage festivals, so Shavuos, Pesach, and Sukkot. Those are times when everybody's up there, so it's all hands on deck. When you talk about the Korban Pesach, so when Jews are bringing the Korban Pesach, so imagine that day, the 14th of Nisan, when everybody's bringing their Korban Pesach, there's thousands of people there. There's thousands of either goats or sheep that need to be processed, and the blood and all these other kinds of things that are going on. You need to have many, many people that are working there during these times. So during those times, it's all hands on deck. But for a regular week out of the year, it's just going to be one of these families. I don't know exactly how many people are in one of these families, but you could imagine several hundred at least, maybe even, I don't know. I imagine something like several hundred. So what would happen is you'd show up. I think you'd get there like on a Friday probably. And you obviously you have to be in a state of purity because you're going to be working in the Beit HaMikdash. You are probably trained already to do the various work in the Beit HaMikdash that might fall to you. Some of these things take more training than others. It's also possible that the ones that really require a lot of skill are not handed over to these mishmarot, that these week-long warriors.
Rabbi, what else is the mishmar? The word sounds familiar to me in Hebrew. What else does it mean?
In modern usage, it often refers to all-night study or late-night study on Thursday nights, which is called mishmar.
Same as cramming?
No, it just means, literally it means to be on watch. I'm assuming that it got the name because it goes late at night. But there became a custom in the yeshiva world, because Fridays tend to be a day without a rigorous schedule. So there came a custom to study late on Thursday night. And so you'd have late Thursday night study, and then the custom came to have cholent together with your late study. So for instance, our Thursday night one is called, we call it mishmar, which is a cholent shmuz, the cholent shmuz or mishmar or something like that. But originally it meant it had something, it was related to a watch, some kind of a watch. Also, in the first Mishnah in Brachot, so it says, this is obviously, since it's Mishnah, we're talking older usage of this term. So it says, like, when do you read the Shema at night? So from the time that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma until the end of the first watch. Now there they call it ashmorah, but it's built on the same word, lishmor. So there it's talking about a stage of night called the first watch.
I mean, lishmor means to guard, right?
But yeah,
Or to keep.
yeah. So these this family is what you would call a watch, or a what would you call it if you're going for something like that. So again, there's 24, all the Kohanim are divided into these 24 families. And let's say your family, when you go up, you'd get there like on a Friday. You'd make sure you have your proper clothing, because we already saw from the Rambam that Kohanim cannot do their service without having their proper clothing. You'd have to make sure you have your proper clothing. You'd have to make sure that you're in a state of purity to be able to do the watch. And then on Shabbos itself, that's when your family's watch begins. Now, what does it mean to be part of the watch? Well, that means that you guys are the ones getting up early in the morning and getting things going. You're going to be the ones who shovel off the ashes from the top of the altar. You're going to be the ones who are preparing the lamb for the Tamid offering and all the other parts of the Tamid offering, the everyday offering that happens in the morning. You guys are going to be the ones who clean the menorah and prepare it to be lit that night. You're going to burn the incense. You're going to, all the various things that are supposed to happen. That happens 365 days a year. Even no matter what the day is, even Yom Kippur, there are certain elements of offerings that are just because it's morning and just because it's afternoon. Your family would be involved in that. And then your family are going to be involved in any of the offerings that happen in between the morning offering and the afternoon offering. So we imagine that there's a line of people waiting at the entrance to the courtyard, to that courtyard where the altar is, and they're there with all manner of offerings that need to be brought, and there's going to be different kohanim handling different aspects of those offerings. And so at some point, the courtyard's going to be buzzing, and there's going to be all sorts of activity with different kohanim dealing with different people, and doing different aspects of the different offerings as they're supposed to be happening. So those are the kohanim that have come up for 1 week. Again, there might be certain jobs that require so much skill that they are not done by the people just coming up for the week, but they actually might be permanent members of the staff of the Beit HaMikdash. Certainly Kohen Gadol is a permanent member of the staff of the Beit HaMikdash, but there seem to be other Kohanim that are also most likely permanent members of the staff, just because what they do requires so much skill. It's not likely that somebody's just going to come up from one of these families and have that skill. So that happens for a week. It starts on Shabbat, and the ceremony of the transfer of the new loaves seems to be the symbolic transfer. So the loaves that are put on top of the showbreads that are put on top of the table inside the building of the Beit HaMikdash, they're brought in by the new shift, and the old ones are taken off by the old shift. And then the ones that have been taken off the table, the food, it's shared by the people in both shifts. And then the old shift would hang around until after Shabbat, but their work is over at that point, and the new shift starts their work. It's sort of interesting, but it does seem to be the case that they start on Shabbos. That's when the new shift starts their work, and then they continue to work throughout the week. They sleep there at those dormitories at the Beit HaMikdash. They actually sleep there at the Beit HaMikdash, and then they would leave after the next Shabbat went out. So that's what he's talking about when he says here, and this is actually mitzvah number 36, which is the mitzvah for them to serve in watches. Now, there are places where the Rambam makes this point that there are some mitzvahs which are an opportunity for a person to get closer to Hashem, and they are the kind of mitzvah you would choose to do. And then there's some kind of mitzvahs that are more bureaucratic. In other words, once you're in this situation, this is how you should do it. So let's say divorce. Divorce is not something you'd go out of your way to do just so that you could fulfill one of the commandments of God. It's just that once you're planning to get a divorce, this is how you should do it. And there's all manner of mitzvahs like that. This seems to be one of those. It seems to be that when we're talking about service in the Beis HaMikdash, it's a mitzvah to organize things like this. It seems to be more of a kind of bureaucratic mitzvah than it is like a dveikostic kind of mitzvah, a mitzvah that is being done in order to get you closer to Hashem. I mean, once you're inside of that bureaucratic circumstance, that is a way to get closer to Hashem. It's just not something, it's in that category of bureaucratic mitzvahs, it looks like. Okay, this is exactly something we were just studying in Nazir, in Daf Yomi. So this is a connection between Daf Yomi and the Rambam's commandments. That is, that priests are commanded to become impure for the relatives that are mentioned in the Torah. Since an account of scripture preventing them from becoming pure for their glory, yet allowing them to become impure for the relatives, they perhaps would think that the option is theirs. If they want to become impure, they become impure. If they don't want to become impure, they don't become impure. Hence, he made a decree upon them and made it obligatory upon them. And that is, he may be exalted and may his name be blessed, saying, for he shall defile himself. That is to say, for his sister. The actual language is talking about that a Kohen shall defile himself for his sister, but we extend it to all those relatives that are considered close relatives. This is talking about a sister who did not get married. If once she's married, he actually cannot defile himself. And again, the language defile is a unfortunate translation. There aren't any good words for this word, but it means to become tameh. If he does not want to become impure, we force him to become impure. And it happened with Yosef the priest, whose wife died on the eve of Pesach. He didn't wish to become impure for her. The sages pushed him and made him do it against his will. And this is actually the commandment of mourning, meaning that any Israelite is obligated to mourn for his relatives. That is, the 6 dead relations which he is commanded. And to strengthen this out, all right, so the Rambam is saying, first of all, that there are 6 relatives. These 6 relatives are his parents, a son or daughter, a brother or a sister. Those are his 6 relatives. Those 6 relatives, the Rambam is saying, a Kohen must become impure. So what does that mean? That, in other words, he must directly engage in the burial of those relatives, the Kohen. Rabbi Rosner.
But not the Kohen Agadol, right?
Right. This is just a regular Kohen.
An everyday Kohen.
An everyday Kohen, even though there's really no such thing as an everyday Kohen. So so Rabbi Rosner quoted a commentary on the Rambam, who suggested that when it comes, first of all, the Rambam says that it is a biblical commandment to bury the dead. He learns it from the mitzvah to bury somebody after they have been given capital punishment. So the Torah says you hang them for a while, and then you have to bury them. So the Rambam says it's not only a mitzvah to bury that person, it's a mitzvah to bury all people. That it's a biblical commandment to bury somebody. So like at the end of at a funeral, when people are helping to shovel the dirt in, you're not just doing an act of chesed. It seems like you're fulfilling a biblical commandment to bury the dead. This commentary was suggesting that really the reason we call it a chesed is because really it's the responsibility of the person to make sure they're buried. The person themselves to make sure they're buried. It's just that the person themselves can't finally carry it out. So you are helping them. You're helping the person who died return to the earth. That's what is supposed to happen. Their body is supposed to return to the earth. So you're helping their body return to the earth because really this is something they should take care of, but they can't. It's sort of weirdly like bris milah. Bris milah, we say, is is a, it's a mitzvah on the person themselves. It's just that the way the person themselves is not going to make sure they have a bris at 8 days old. So other people do it on behalf of the person, but that's the attitude you have. You have the attitude that you're doing it on behalf of the child. Really, this is the child's responsibility. If the child would grow up and the child was not given a bris, now it's fully their responsibility to make sure that somebody gives them a bris. But it's always been their responsibility. And he wanted to success. So it is with us when it comes to our death, that we're supposed to ensure that we're buried. Again, it's going to require others to finally fulfill that. So since we think of this like a chesed for the person, so you could imagine why, let's say a child, why would a child, we would say to a child, you have to do this because this is a chesed. I'm assuming Kibbud Av V'Em also measures into this. Honoring your parents would measure into this, but this is a act of loving kindness on behalf of that person, and you should be the one to do it. This morning, Sam asked whether the firstborn, let's say there's several sons, would this be something that falls on the head of the firstborn son? And I told him I don't know for sure, but I think, even though I don't have any text for this, but my intuition is that it would be something where we have everybody, especially this Rambam. This Rambam seems to suggest that everybody needs to get involved. And this is, again, not just for somebody's parent, but that we actually force them to be involved, which means if they're becoming tamei, it's because they're handling the body. Either they're doing the tahara, because the tahara might very well be done inside. My father still remembers the tahara for his uncle. He lived in a side-by-side, like a townhouse, like a side-by-side house. And on one side was an uncle, and the other side was him and his family. So, and he remembers the uncle died, and they had the uncle on a board on the table in my father's house. That's where they did the tahara. And they were all, it was family members who were doing the tahara.
Rabbi, a lot of people, a number of people, I mean, I'm sure you know this, but, they actually go and buy, the casket and make the arrangements before the person dies, knowing that at some point he's going to die, whether it's close or far away.
There's an author,
like when Steve did it.
No, he picked out. I remember when he went down to pick out his graves.
So what's that the same thing as this? That?
Yeah, this would fit that. In other words, ultimately, it's the individual's responsibility. It's just that obviously, one of the citations to support this was that there's a midrash that in the desert, after the decree that the adult males will die in the desert, will not go to into Israel. So every year they would dig graves and lie down in their own grave. And then at some point, Moshe would say, okay, get up. And anyone who wasn't dead would get up. So they asked, like, why are they digging their own graves? And so this commentary was suggesting the reason you're digging your own grave is because ultimately you're the one responsible to bury yourself. So in the best of all scenarios, you would have dug your own grave, you would have gone into it, and you would have died. And obviously somebody would still probably
take another step further. I have this book that I was reading about death and preparing for it, and I actually liked. I don't know if I could do it, but I like the fact that the person who's writing the book tells you should write, like instructions for the people, so that it's not on them, to do all that. I mean, because I know when my mother died, my sister did everything, and because we're here in Sarasota, at least in Chicago, and she did everything, which is putting a lot of onus of the responsibility on the person.
Right. Yeah. Makes perfect sense. So, yeah. So when you're bearing somebody else, you're doing, that's what we mean. Like this, again, would be, according to this commentary on the Rambam that Rabbi Rosner brought, this would be what we mean when we say it's a chesed. It's a chesed.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
If a Kohen is the only person around, it's not a relative of his, but he's the only person there to bury it. Is he allowed to, even though?
Not only is he allowed to, he has to. And not only that, but the Kohen Gadol, even the Kohen Gadol has to. In fact, Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik from Boston and New York, of blessed memory. So he suggested, he wanted to show the kind of democratic values that could come as a result of this scenario. He said, imagine you have a person who's lying dead in a field, and the Kohen Gadol is walking by, and it's Erev Yom Kippur. So this Kohen Gadol is the most important person in the community, in the whole country, especially at that moment. He's the most important person in the country at that moment. This person who's lying dead, if he's lying dead out in a field, very likely is on the fringe of society, because it just doesn't happen to people that aren't on the fringe. I mean, every once in a while it might by accident, but otherwise it's most likely a homeless person, somebody that we would consider on the fringe of society. If you were coming up with a system for determining how to place people in a hierarchy, the Kohen Gadol would be at the very top, and most likely this person would be at the very bottom. And yet the Kohen Gadol has a mitzvah to bury this person, even though if he buries him, then he is now going to be impure, and he's not going to be able to do the most holy, important service on behalf of the Jewish people. But for the sake of this person, who very likely represents a kind of fringe of society, he has to sacrifice all of that, because that's, in a certain sense, this person really isn't an unimportant member of the fringe. He is made in the same image, of God that the Kohen Gadol is made in. But anyway, so he uses that as an example.
Rabbi, when we were studying Talmud over the last few years, I do remember saying one of the examples I think that we went over was, if someone dies in a field, don't they take the distance between the two places, like the two cities that are?
That's if he's murdered. That's if he's murdered. Only if he was murdered. If he was murdered, then you have that, we call it egla arufa. They have to take a calf and kill it, and then the elders of the city hold up their hands and say, "Our hands did not spill this blood," because this is if somebody was murdered.
Okay.
And there's concern that they provide. Yeah. Okay. So this is just first of all important and interesting that the Rambam says that it's not that you can become impure, it's that you must become impure. That's A. And then this second part, which was,
but it's optional for a wife.
No, they made him. It said here, and it happened that Yosef the priest, his wife died on Erev Pesach. He didn't want to be impure, and the sages made him.
Oh,
they made him do it against his will. In other words, he didn't want to, because it's Erev Pesach. He's thinking, there's all these people are coming, and he must have felt like he's letting his fellow people down. Plus, it does warn in the Mishkan against Kohanim having any connection to death or the dead. And I don't know, he may have gotten in his head that therefore he's supposed to separate himself from it. But what they told him is he's got to bury her. And in other words, he has to be the one. He has to be the one to bury her. And yeah, so he has to
Well,
be the one to
I thought the ones they mentioned did not mention the ones that you have to did not mention the wife. That's why I.
You're right,
wondered.
because we said 6, right? We said 6.
Yep.
So the 6 are, so.
In the Torah, it doesn't say wife.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting that they made, you're right. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Right. So she's technically not one of the 6, but they're saying this is actually the commandment of, mourning, meaning that any Israelite is obligated to mourn for his relatives. That is the 6 dead relations about which he is commanded. So why do they keep on calling it 6? Unless because you have parents, brother and sister, and children. Maybe a child is not divided up as son and daughter. I don't know. How are they calling it 6 with the wife here? Because the wife is, so that's the second part of this Rambam. The Rambam is saying that this grouping, the ones that he has to defile himself for, are also the ones that we all mourn for when we do what we call Shiva. Here, I'm just going to look here for 1 second to see how they get the 6.
Good question, Lois.
Whenever Lois asks a question is by definition.
Yeah, she's very good.
Right, 6 family members. Kohen. Right. All right. Father, mother, brother, unmarried sister. Oh, child. It just says child. So that's why. And then wife. The defilement of the Kohen to his wife is implied in the Torah, but it's not listed.
I thought it,
All right.
since it left it out, I thought it implied the other way, but never mind.
Right. Well, you see here, look at, you see this case. They forced him. If he does not want to recur, we force him to become impure. And it happened that Yosef the priest, whose wife died on the eve of Pesach, did not wish to become impure for her. The sages pushed him and made him do it against his will. So they are, and that's, you're talking while the Beis Hamikdash is still around. So you're talking pre-Mishnah, and they're forcing him to. So he obviously it's one of the 6, and he calls it the 6. He calls it the 6, and I guess wife is one of the 6 because they're just calling it a child instead of son and daughter, just a child. All right, that is the 6 dead relations commanded, and to strike this obligation, he explained it with a priest for whom impurity is prohibited, that he must become impure regardless, so that the law of mourning not be uprooted. But really, it's a law that applies to everybody. So they're just saying even applies by a Kohen, but this law of mourning applies to everybody. And it has already been explained that the obligation of mourning is a positive commandment. However, only on the first day, whereas the rest is rabbinic. This is a matter of dispute amongst different medieval commentaries. The Rambam famously says that it is a biblical commandment the first day, but apparently it's only a biblical commandment the first day if the person is buried that day. So that first day, if the person died and is buried the same day, then the mourning on that day is biblical. Otherwise, it's all rabbinic. And I believe Tosfot just say the first day is biblical. I think in my mind it's that Tosfot say the first day is biblical, even if it's not the same day that the person died.
What's the difference between rabbinical and the other one?
Biblical? Biblical.
I don't know. What am I missing today?
It comes from the Torah.
One is from the Torah, the other one isn't?
The other one is an addition by the rabbis, like
All right.
they would
All
do it through legislation.
All right.
Would have legislated, they would have voted on it, there would have been. So so obviously the notion of Shiva is mentioned in the Torah. There was mourning for 7 days mentioned in the Torah, but we don't, just because that was about, I think Yaakov, it talks about mourning 7 days for Yaakov, but we don't base our mitzvot on events that happen before, unless the Torah tells us to afterwards. But mitzvot themselves are always post Exodus. Post Exodus, you can have mitzvot from the 613, but not pre-Exodus. Now, there are some times where the mitzvah will be repeated post-Exodus. So it was, let's say, Brit Milah, circumcision. So circumcision is mentioned from, obviously in Lech Lecha, but then it's mentioned again in the Torah portion of Tazria. So we say, and the Rambam also mentions this, that we say that you are commanded because of the one that it said in Tazria, but which is later on. But once we've been commanded, we now look back and see the source of it in the command to Abraham. So you'd say the same thing, even though Shiva is mentioned, that people mourn for 7 days is mentioned, but it wasn't a commandment just because it's mentioned in the Torah. And therefore, certainly the rest of the days after day one are considered rabbinic. And in many circumstances, even day one might be considered rabbinic. But this is one of the places where he's saying that the first day of mourning is biblical. And so that biblical commandment is to mourn for these 6 relatives. So again, a father and mother, a brother and a sister, a child and a wife. And in the explanation, they said in Moed Katan, he does not observe mourning on the festival. If the mourning is from before, the positive commandment of the many pushes off the positive commandment of the individual. So if you started mourning, and then, so let's say you have day one of your mourning, and then the next day is going to be Passover. So then you stop mourning at that point. Let's continue with this tomorrow, because not tomorrow, what's today, Wednesday? We're going to continue with this mitzvah on Monday, because I don't want to rush through it. This is one that has, that we all have to deal with at some points. So let's make sure to talk about it more.
Pastor Koach, Rabbi, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Be well, guys. All right.
Enjoy not to not. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.